I believe that we are on the edge of corporations taking over our democracy. When corporations are people and money equals free speech, we have essentially bought into what I would call the rule of money. The rule of money, especially as it relates to campaigns, is if you spend enough money on polling, use those what I call poll-tested pretty words on enough slick mailers and TV commercials, and pound your message, which I might also call propaganda, over and over and over again, you can do two things. You can convince people to vote against their own interests, and you can distract people from the things that really matter, like education, women's health, putting money into the university instead of the correction system. I could go on and on. But when politics is a spectator sport, and we watch what happens, and the only way you get ahead as a candidate is because you have more money, lost in that equation is human contact. You're looking at the TV and you're sitting there by yourself. Lost is any discussion of what we want our community to be right here in our neighborhood. What we want its quality to be. And what the obstacles are to creating that kind of community that we want to live in. And lost is we, the people. I can think of so many examples, but I'll give you just one. The day that the governor announced his, shall I say, 100 million property tax relief, or maybe we'll say $13, but only for some people. The same day, same time, the Legislative Fiscal Bureau announced that we now have an estimated $750 million deficit going into the next budget. And the governor bounced the silver ball over here, and everybody ran over to watch that silver ball, as if we're all in the state Cocker Spaniels and have the attention span of Cocker Spaniels.
Unfair to Cocker Spaniels.
I used to be a dairy farmer, and I had in succession 3 border collies, so I'll pick on border collies. They're very smart, but they can be distracting. Okay, one more example. The 3-ring circus. A couple of Thursdays ago, we had a 3-ring circus in the Capitol. In center ring was a newly formed committee called the Common Core Special Select Committee on Common Core Standards. Now, never mind the fact that Common Core Standards have been around since 2010, and those of you who are in education have been slowly working to implement them with a few hitches, but you're slowly working. In the assembly ring, they were considering the repeal of something called the race-based mascots. The warriors, the chieftains, something that was passed in 2009-10 that they now want to turn over because there are certain legislators representing Mukwonago and Waukesha County that want to make good friends at home. But in the Senate Education Committee, we were considering the statewide expansion of privately operated charter schools. All of the media and all the statewide attention went to the Common Core standards. It's the little silver ball bouncing up and down. The real issue is something called Senate Bill 76, which I just found out today is going to be voted on next week, that would expand statewide charter schools. In this hearing, now the Education Committee members were actually pulled out of the Education Committee and had to go to listen to this circus on the Common Core standards. And I, for some reason, I guess maybe because I would raised hell, didn't get appointed to that committee. So I was one of two legislators, me and Senator Olson, who also didn't get appointed to it, who actually sat and listened to the whole charter school bill testimony. And we heard a woman from an organization called Rocket Ship Education.
Oh my God, what a name.
From California, who talked about how we needed to rewrite the rules on charter schools so that they would be more friendly to private operators from out of state. Now, I've been getting around the state, listening to where people are and what they're concerned about. And I was in Osseo on Saturday, and a bright fellow, local businessman said to me, I don't understand the voucher, charter, choice words. I don't know what they mean. There's nothing in Polk County that looks like a privately operated charter school. Nothing at all. I don't understand it. So I explained to him what they were and briefly impersonated Leah Vukmir, if you'll forgive me, and explained to him that some organizations and different corporate interests want to have the dollars follow the student, and what parent could be opposed to something called choice? Everyone wants choices. This afternoon, as I was preparing for this hearing and writing a column about this, I got a chance to read Diane Ravitch's new book. And she's going to be in Madison on Thursday, right? Week from Thursday, all right. I strongly suggest that you go hear her. If you don't know her, she was from the Bush administration. I think she was working in the Department of Education in about 2006. She's completely reversed her original thinking, and she goes after both the Bush administration and the Obama administration on education, as she describes the corporate takeover of public education. And it is sobering, page after page after page. She talks about what happened in Louisiana, she talks about what happens in other states, and she describes all of the players that have put this force across the nation together to privatize our public schools. And what's so sad for me is that so much of the state has no idea what we mean when we talk about privatization, voucher schools, charter schools, or God forbid the word in this term, in this usage, the word choice. Because it's hard to be opposed to choice, and I try not to use it. I try to talk about private money for public money for private schools, because I think that's exactly what's happening. And tomorrow I'm going to be going to Antigo and to Rhinelander, and I'm going there to do a town hall meeting on the budget, and I'm going to be talking about some very basic facts related to the budget, and such things as the government has not shrunk in the state. It's actually growing. It's $4 billion more dollars in this budget than in the last budget, but also to help people understand the relationship between who they vote for, what happens in the Capitol, and what happens in their neighborhoods. And I went through all of the wonderful tax breaks they got, because they didn't get any property tax breaks up north, and also the cuts to the schools that are actually funneling dollars from the small rural schools in the north and the west to the independent charter schools in Milwaukee and now Racine. And this is something that I think is a very strong argument for local people. No matter where you go, no matter what part of the state I am in, people love their public schools. And in the rural areas, the public schools are the center of that community. And to lose that school means to lose that community. And no matter what your political persuasion is, you don't want that money taken away and sent to private school operators somewhere, anywhere, somewhere in California. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. And I see changes happening around the state that are very encouraging. I believe that we have not yet reaped the fruits of our labor with regard to the investment in time and energy that people made during the collection of signatures in 2011 and the recalls in 2012, but especially that tremendous grassroots effort that happened in 2011.
Don't forget the occupation.
Yes, absolutely. That was part of it and part of getting people educated. You're absolutely right. I want to give people a chance to ask questions. I know there's a lot of questions that people mentioned when I was moving around the room, and there's a lot that we can do together. And there's a lot that we can do together to address the problem I just described of the people in the North and the West who just do not have information about what's happening in the Capitol. So let's start with a question. Anybody have a question? Yes.
If you run for governor, what is your strategy for winning?
Thanks. That's a good question. The answer is one simple word: people. I strongly believe that Democrats cannot win by accepting the rules that Republicans have created and following those rules and expecting to best the Republicans when they've written the rules of the game.
Yeah.
I believe that we win by breaking that rule of money. We get money out of politics by beating it. And we do that with the power of people all across the state. And we are very blessed in 2013-14 with new technologies that are changing every single day. So very much I am interested in being the candidate that is on the very edge of the vanguard of using technology in politics. Because I believe that there are many well-meaning people in northern and western Wisconsin that voted for Scott Walker, and if they knew what you knew, they would not vote for him again. Just a footnote. So herein lies the challenge, ladies and gentlemen. I want you to adopt someone who lives on the other side of the information chasm, which I think exists somewhere in Columbia County near Portage. Very little news that falls into this chasm actually makes its way up the very steep other side to Wausau or Toma, and certainly never makes it to Rhinelander or Antigo, where I'm going to be tomorrow, or to Buffalo County, where I live when I am actually back at farm. So here's my challenge. Find someone you know on the other side of the chasm. And remember Earl and Gaylord. Earl was from Waukesha and met the county chair in Jackson County, which is out west, on the bus as it took him from the east side of Madison down to this Capitol Square to protest. Earl and Gaylord became fast friends. And Earl now sends Gaylord all the important news that those Democrats in Jackson County need to get. And Gaylord turns around and sends it out in an email, because we often don't open attachments in the West. We certainly don't use Facebook because it's got way too many pictures on it. but we can sometimes click through on a link. So Gaylord takes this information out to his Democrats in Jackson County, and those Democrats turn around and write letters to the editor to their local papers. And just in my district, I have 24 weekly local papers. Just in my district. That's how I started writing that column. And then the other fellas, they take what was written in the letter to the editor, they take it under their arm to the coffee shop and the co-op, and they talk about what was there, and they educate people where they really get their information, which is at the coffee shop and the bar. So that's my long answer.
That was my question.
Great minds think alike. Yes, I'm back. No? Hi? Yes.
Yeah, so you touched on some great ones that I wanted, the fiscal stuff and the debt just going up and nobody's seeing that, education for sure, but also the environment.
Yes.
And it's just got to be a part of the discussion if we want to have any hope of getting everybody on the same page.
Yes, yes, yes. Those of you who were on Facebook in the last week saw the explosion of information both related to the sand mines in western Wisconsin and the iron ore mine in the north. I know that some of you are learning about sand mines for the first time, so I just want to briefly touch on the idea of a sand mine because it's very foreign, because the media in especially Milwaukee hasn't covered this stuff at all. A sand mine is a mine that takes out a 500-million-year-old sand that is the right hardness and shape to use in the fracking industry, which is where the oil and natural gas industry sends at high volume down into the earth a mixture of sand and hundreds of chemicals to hold open these fissures in the earth to release natural gas and sometimes oil. Western Wisconsin in the last 2 years has become the epicenter in North America for the sand mine industry. In one county, there are 28 mines and mine processing plants. And this is where they sort the sand, they add chemicals to it, they clump the sand, and they then load it onto trucks and then load it onto rail cars. It's created a huge problem in western Wisconsin, not only because of the 800 trucks a day going by your rural farm, not only because of the lights shining in your windows when you're trying to sleep, or the loud noise that's happening at these plants next door, but because they use high-capacity wells in an area when the DNR the legislature has asked the DNR to not even consider the bunches of wells that are already out there, what they call the cumulative effect of these wells. And they are very concerned about the air, because sand dust in the air contains silica, which causes silicosis, which is akin in disease world to something like asbestosis. To give you a feel for what we're dealing with in western Wisconsin, in Arcadia Township, there are 5 mines within 5 miles, and in the middle of that ring are 2 subdivisions with many small children. Now, several months ago, the Trempealeau County Board voted by 1 vote against a moratorium to at least slow down what was happening in Trempealeau County. And there was a physician and a physician's assistant who joined the citizen group of hundreds of people trying to educate the Board of Supervisors. And in August, they voted unanimously to put a 1-year moratorium on sand mining in Trempealeau County. Ashland County is similarly dealing with a mine issue. Just a week ago, Ashland County considered an ordinance related to the use of explosives, and particularly related to the use of explosives when it came to exploding asbestos-laden rock. 3 days after the county board considered this, Senator Tiffany introduced a bill in the legislature, Senate Bill 349, that would take away local government's ability to use their police powers, and this is their powers related to health and safety, to regulate sand mines in normal, ordinary ways that you would think that they would need to do to be good neighbors. Like, if you're going to blast, at least give me 24 hours notice. If your mine sucks up all my water, at least fix my well and throw me another one. That's the kind of stuff that's in these ordinances. But they also, Senator Tiffany's friends, put in this bill a prohibition, meaning you could not, at the local level, including the city of Madison and the city of Milwaukee, you could not write in an ordinance protections for water quality, water quantity, air quality, the use of explosives, or any reimbursement related to road damage. And it applies all across the state. It is not just limited to sand mines. So you may have heard me on the radio in the last week or so. I've been trying to get all around the state saying there's one thing that I know, well, there's two things that people in Wisconsin agree on. One is they hate money in politics, regardless of their political persuasion. But the second is they want local control. I don't care if you're a libertarian, an independent, a Republican, or a Democrat. You don't want somebody at the Capitol or in some office building somewhere making a decision about what happens in your neighborhood. Local land use has always been a local control, done at the local control, and it needs to stay there.
Was that bill tabled?
No.
Oh.
No, but we are having some success. The bill has not had a vote in the Senate Mining Committee after a 10-hour hearing where the first 6 hours were mostly taken up by lobbyists who were in support of the mine. And they were in support of the mine and they didn't live anywhere near any of the mines. But they had all the benefits and none of the costs. So those poor people that came from western Wisconsin, a lot of them didn't even get to testify. You may have seen Mike McCabe's very excellent story about what happened. But the one thing that happened is that Robin Voss, the Speaker in the Assembly, said that he wouldn't take up the bill until January. Here's the problem. What we're hearing in the Capitol is that this bill is going to be added to a whole lot of other bills that are all passed in the 11th hour, the last day before the legislature goes home to campaign. That's what we're hearing. And then it's the whole, we'll pass a bill that everybody will agree with, and that'll be on the front page, and it's the bouncing silver ball and the border collie. That we won't ever get the information out statewide that this bill is passed. So it's very important that people know about this, that you tell your friends about it, and I'll certainly be out there telling people, and I'm really grateful for your question. Thank you.
Act 10. If you are fortunate enough to be elected governor of this state, what will you do about Act 10?
I despise Act 10. I will tell you why to stop Act 10. And while you have to remember the context of Act 10. The day before the governor made this public, he told his cabinet, tomorrow we're dropping the bomb. Okay, if you really want to solve problems, you don't drop bombs. You bring people in, you sit them down at the table, you get them to talk about their problems, and you get the solution that everybody can agree with. That's what needed to happen, and clearly the employees went more than their fair share to say, look, we accept the concessions, and he had deaf ears for that.
Well, that wasn't the point.
Well, it wasn't the point. Obviously, we know what the point was, and we can see the effect of it. Who was standing in the way of the governor crushing public education and privatizing it? We know who was standing in the way. Who had the power to say, look, you're not going to take away the money from our little children? It was, and it was the teachers.
Oh, yeah.
It was the teachers. And when you eviscerate the teachers' only voice, you all of a sudden can march all over public education, which is something I said back then and I still believe because I've seen the effect of it every day when I serve on the Senate Education Committee.
The teachers are the lobby for the children of Wisconsin.
And it's a lobby that does not have the same ability to influence what happens at the Capitol. Now that said, I understand that passing legislation is about votes. I understand you got to have 50 votes in the Assembly and 17 in the Senate and one governor that won't veto it. I get that. But I can tell you, any wise executive brings her workers to the table and listens and implements their suggestions. And that's exactly what I would do as governor. That's what we do. There's a question in the back.
What would you do if you were elected governor to promote equality, especially focusing on LGBTQ rights, and also disbanding the constitutional amendment for same-sex marriage?
Yeah.
Well, again, there's no question in my mind that this is the #1 civil rights issue of our time. We are watching the world move from Anita Bryant to full equality, and we are way behind in Wisconsin. And I'll answer your question, but I first have to tell you a story that pains me. I have two very good friends who live in my county, and I drive by their house every time I go to Madison. They have lived they're two women, they have lived in a committed relationship for 25 years. They're both professors. They were on one of the very first people to be married in Minnesota, and they were on Duluth radio saying that they were leaving the state because the state was no longer friendly to them. And I just have tears in my eyes when I drive by their house, and it now is totally empty and has 2 for sale signs in it. And I believe this is happening all over Wisconsin. We know very simple public health information. If you live in a state that does not treat you equal, it has a profound effect on you, on your family, on your ability to do what you need to do. This is very, very basic. We need to repeal the gay hate amendment, and we need to pass marriage equality. Woo! Very basic. Yeah, here.
One thing that we all learned from Senator Feingold, if we learned one thing from him, was that whether it's your cause or somebody else's cause, special interest money has no business in politics. Living on the east side of Madison, I'm guilty like everyone else. I tend to forget that. My special interests are better than your special interests. But one thing that I can't understand, and I was wondering if maybe you can shed some light on, is why are so many special interest lobbyists for example, NARAL, mischaracterizing your views on choice? And could you address that, please, in this neighborhood?
Thank you, appreciate that. For the record, I believe that abortion should be safe, legal, rare, and highly accessible, and the danger that we're facing right now is that it is not accessible. I grew up in a strongly devout Catholic family that was pro-life. I've left my roots like many of us have, and when I read in 2006, there were 2 restrictions on abortion, a 24-hour waiting period and a parental consent law that had a whole bunch of other people that could serve for parents if there were problems. I said I would vote for no additional restrictions on abortion, and that is my record. My record is all posted on my website. If you have anybody that wants to get additional information, it's all out there, it's all public, and it's certainly something that a lot of people have talked about. And there are a few people that are in a lot of different special interest groups, not just NARAL, but there are a few people in a lot of different special interest groups that say, well, Kathleen Vinehout didn't voted only 97% with me. Well, you know, that's true. I think there's no lobbying group that I have voted with 100%. I even didn't have a 100% voting record with the environmentalists because I disagreed on what they said about nuclear power. I did not like the idea that they were doing away with the nuclear power moratorium. So my voting record is very public. It's all out there, and thanks for the question.
we're asking people to vote to reverse their vote, not to vote for Walker.
We're asking people to reverse their vote on Governor Walker. Yes, especially in my neighborhood.
Things that I see, they're concerned that we need to address social, they're convinced that we're enabling people to kill themselves and rip off welfare and all that business.
Right.
Seems
All of the evils are from social welfare moms. That's a pretty old
they're all
argument.
from Democrats.
And they're all what?
From Democrats, and all the problems. That's an issue I think needs to be addressed. Pension envy of teachers' salaries and pensions, public service, is another real issue, I believe, in the minds of the people that voted for Walker. We're asking them, as we did in the recall. We said, hey, dummy, you didn't vote right, go vote the other way. Right away we asked that. We're asking these people now to vote the other way.
Yeah.
Are we going to show concern for these two concerns?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And if I can just summarize the question, we're asking people in 2014 in western and northern Wisconsin to vote a different way than they did in 2012 and in the recall in 2010 and 2012. And in that time, in 2012, a lot of it had to do with the teachers and what was happening and benefits and budget and that kind of stuff. And how do we change that? Is that fair characterization of your question? All politics is local, and I believe that the best way to show people that the governor is not for their best interest is to talk about what has happened to their local community as a result of the 3 and next year 4 years of the Walker administration. All of this information is public record, but instead of lists of bills and lists of numbers, we need to develop a story that echoes with the people that we visit. So instead of saying the governor took $200,000 out of the Black River Falls budget, I will tell you that I know that 3 of the 5 shop teachers had to be fired because they didn't have the money to pay their salaries. And those kids now have only a little tiny bit of a really great shop room because there's not enough skills there among the existing teachers to help those kids. And I know in Elma Center, which had one of the best FFA teams in all of the state, that they lost their only agriculture education teacher in the heart of cranberry and dairy country. They don't have an ag teacher right now, and they're going to lose their FFA certification if they can't get that ag teacher back. And this is just a tiny little bit, but what I'm talking about is a part of the state in the north and the west that has been underfunded for a very long time. In that very county, Jackson County, they are turning the asphalt roads back into gravel. They cannot keep up with all of the road maintenance that needs to be done. They used to pay 15 miles, maybe now they can pay 5. And I could go on and on about the problems that have been created because of the votes were taken in the Capitol that took away local control. It took away the ability of the county to share equipment with other counties because they wanted to privatize the road maintenance because of the power, the legislative power of the Wisconsin road builders. This is a small taste of the answer to your question.
I'm just wondering if it's kind of impacting. I mean, I just think, it's like the bully politics thing, you know, it's like over 80% of people are happy with their schools and against vouchers, and yet they pass vouchers anyway. I mean, don't you think that's going to impact voters during election time, or are people just going to vote the way they've always voted?
I believe that the answer to changing people's minds is having an army of people that know the details about how Walker's policies have affected their local community. And Remember what I said at the beginning. What's lost in the politics equals spectator sport and a horse race, what's lost is that human contact. We're not going to win by having more TV ads that are nastier than the Republicans. It's simply not going to work. We have to show people what's happening in their neighborhood and all over the state. Have that dialogue about what kind of a community we want to live in and what the barriers are to having that kind of great community. The antidote to propaganda is dialogue.
So what you're saying,
All right.
Kathleen, what you're saying is a lot of people should run against him then, right?
I can only take one more question because there's a band tonight and we eventually have to vacate this room, and I'm very grateful for everybody, and there's one more question.
So we need to have budgets to save our schools. How else do you think we can fund our schools so we aren't cutting $800,000 a year?
Thank you. Good question. I wrote an alternative budget. I ended the budget in a huge surplus. One of the things I did in the budget is fund every dime of what Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Evers, put in his budget request to the governor, which is to fully fund the implementation of fair funding for our future, which changes the funding formula, holds all schools harmless that would have benefit from benefit from the current system, and raises up the schools that need the money by recognizing certain things that are facts, which are, we have seen a huge increase in student poverty. We know it costs more to educate students who are poor. We've seen a huge increase in students who do not speak English as their primary language. We recognize it takes more to educate those, costs more to educate those students. And for the rural areas, we know that the state is spending only about 10% of their entire transportation budget, is funding only 10% of their transportation budget. So the answer is that we need to implement Tony's budget. All of the work has been done for that, and it would make a huge difference all around the state. And the math is all on my website. It's all been done. How to do this. So